Black single mom collapses at the bus stop, wakes up in the Mafia boss's bed. The fluorescent lights of the diner flickered one last time before Alicia Martinez finally locked the door behind her. Her reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, hollow cheeks, dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, and hair pulled back in a messy bun that had seen better days. The digital clock on her phone read 11:47 p.m. Another 16-hour day done. Her feet screamed in protest as she walked toward the bus stop 3 blocks away. The worn sneakers she'd been meaning to replace for months had holes that let in the cold October air, but replacing them meant choosing between new shoes and her son Marcus's asthma medication. The choice was always easy, even if it left her feet freezing. The city at midnight was a different beast than during the day. Shadows stretched longer, sounds carried farther, and the few people still walking the streets moved with purpose, or desperation. Alicia kept her head down, her purse clutched tight against her body. Inside was exactly $43.67, plus the crumpled tips from tonight's shift. Every penny counted when you were 3 weeks behind on rent. She pulled out her phone to check the bus schedule, squinting at the cracked screen. The next bus wouldn't arrive for another 28 minutes. Her shoulders sagged. 28 more minutes standing in the cold, 28 more minutes away from Marcus, who was sleeping at Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment down the hall. The elderly woman had been a godsend, watching Marcus for free while Alicia worked her double shifts at the diner and cleaned offices afterward. "Just need to make it through this week," she whispered to herself, the same mantra she'd been repeating for months. Things will get better. But her body had other plans. The exhaustion hit her like a freight train. One moment she was standing at the bus stop, checking her phone, and the next, the world tilted sideways. Her vision blurred, black spots dancing at the edges. She reached out for the bench, but her legs gave out completely. Alicia collapsed onto the cold concrete, her purse spilling its contents across the sidewalk. Coins rolled into the gutter, and her worn wallet landed near a storm drain. She tried to push herself up, but her arms felt like jelly. Her heart hammered against her ribs, and she couldn't catch her breath. "Help!" she whispered, but the word barely escaped her lips. The street was empty, just broken streetlights and the distant hum of traffic from the highway. When was the last time she'd eaten a real meal? Yesterday? The day before? She'd been surviving on coffee and whatever leftover fries the kitchen would let her take home. Everything went to Marcus first: his food, his clothes, his medicine. She was just the afterthought. Her eyelids grew heavy. The concrete beneath her cheek was freezing, but she couldn't summon the strength to move. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the rumble of a car engine, but it sounded like it was coming from underwater. The black sedan pulled up to the curb with barely a whisper. 2 men stepped out, their expensive suits looking out of place in this rundown neighborhood. The taller one, Vincent, adjusted his tie and looked down at the woman sprawled on the sidewalk. "This her?" he asked his partner, Tommy, who was checking a crumpled piece of paper against his phone's flashlight. Tommy squinted at Alicia's unconscious form, then at the photo on his phone. "Martinez, Alicia. Lives on Elm Street. Works at Murphy's Diner." He shrugged. "Close enough. Boss said to bring her in quiet like?" Vincent frowned. "She don't look like much. You sure this is the one who's been dodging payments? Does it matter?" Tommy was already moving toward Alicia, pulling a pair of latex gloves from his jacket pocket. "Boss wants her, we bring her. Questions ain't our job." Alicia stirred slightly as Vincent lifted her under the arms, a soft moan escaping her lips. Her head lolled back, revealing the exhausted features of a woman pushed far beyond her limits. She was younger than they'd expected, maybe late 20s, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work and sacrifice. "She's light," Vincent muttered as they carried her toward the car. "When's the last time this girl ate?" "Not our problem," Tommy replied, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. Something about this felt wrong. The woman they'd been sent to collect was supposed to be a problem, someone who'd been thumbing her nose at the organization, living it up while owing serious money. This woman looked like she was barely surviving. They placed Alicia in the back seat of the sedan, Vincent sliding in beside her while Tommy took the wheel. As the car pulled away from the curb, Vincent noticed the scattered contents of her purse still on the sidewalk. A few crumpled bills, some loose change, and what looked like a child's drawing that had been folded and refolded until it was soft as cloth. "Drive slow," he told Tommy, surprising himself. "She don't look too good." The sedan glided through empty streets, carrying its unconscious cargo toward the outskirts of the city. Alicia remained slumped against the leather seat, unaware that her collapse at a deserted bus stop had just changed the trajectory of her life forever. In her unconscious state, she couldn't know that the men who'd taken her had grabbed the wrong woman, or that this case of mistaken identity would soon entangle her in a world she never knew existed. As the city lights faded behind them, Vincent found himself checking her pulse at her wrist, relieved when he felt the steady beat beneath her skin. Whatever debts had brought them here tonight, whatever orders they were following, something told him this woman wasn't the enemy they'd been sent to collect. But in their line of work, being wrong about such things could be deadly, for all of them. Silk. That was the first thing Alicia noticed as consciousness slowly crept back into her mind. The sheets beneath her fingers were silk, smooth, expensive, nothing like the rough cotton ones she'd bought second-hand from the thrift store. Her eyes fluttered open to find herself staring at an ornate ceiling painted with cherubs and gold leaf details that belonged in a museum, not wherever she was supposed to be. Panic hit her like ice water. She bolted upright, immediately regretting the sudden movement as her head spun violently. The room around her was massive, bigger than her entire apartment. Rich mahogany furniture gleamed under the soft light of crystal lamps, and floor-to-ceiling windows draped in burgundy velvet revealed manicured gardens beyond. This wasn't a hospital. This wasn't anywhere she recognized. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking. Her son. Where was Marcus? She swung her legs over the side of the four-poster bed, only to realize she was wearing a silk nightgown she'd never seen before. Someone had changed her clothes. Someone had touched her while she was unconscious. Her heart hammered as fragmented memories surfaced: the bus stop, the cold concrete, the sound of a car engine. Everything after that was blank, a terrifying void where her life should be. The bedroom door opened without warning, and Alicia scrambled backward on the bed, pulling the covers up to her chin. A man entered, tall, imposing, with dark hair slicked back and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a three-piece suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months, and he moved with the fluid grace of a predator. But it was his face that made her breath catch. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, and features that would have been handsome if not for the cold fury burning in his eyes. "You're awake." His voice was deep, cultured, with just a hint of an accent she couldn't place. "Italian, maybe?" "Who are you?" Alicia demanded, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "Where am I? Where's my son?" The man's expression flickered, surprise, perhaps, or confusion. He studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl, his gaze moving over her face like he was searching for something specific. "My name is Dominic Moretti," he said finally, and even Alicia, who lived paycheck to paycheck and rarely watched the news, recognized that name. Moretti. The crime family that ran half the city's underground operations. Her blood turned to ice. "Your son," he continued, his voice carefully controlled, "is safe. For now." "For now?" The words came out as a squeak. "What does that mean? I don't understand what's happening. I was at the bus stop, I collapsed, and now you're here." Dominic cut her off, moving closer to the bed. "And I'm trying to figure out why my men brought me a woman who looks exactly like my dead wife." Alicia's mouth fell open. "You're what?" Dominic pulled a silver-framed photograph from his jacket pocket and held it up. Even from across the room, Alicia could see the resemblance was striking. The same dark hair, the same bone structure, the same wide brown eyes. The woman in the photo could have been her sister. "Isabella," Dominic said, his voice softer now, almost reverent. "She died 3 years ago. Car accident." His jaw tightened. And then my men drag in some woman from a bus stop who could be her twin. You'll forgive me if I find that suspicious. Suspicious? Alicia's fear was rapidly transforming into anger. You think I chose to look like your dead wife? You think I collapsed on purpose so your goons could kidnap me? My men don't make mistakes, Dominic replied coldly. They were sent to collect Alicia Martinez, Elm Street, Murphy's Diner. Someone who owes my organization a considerable amount of money. I don't owe anybody anything. Alicia shot back. I work 2 jobs, I pay my bills, I mind my own business. I've never even seen you before in my life. But even as she said it, something nagged at her. Martinez wasn't exactly an uncommon name, but still. Her father's face flashed in her mind, the man who'd walked out when she was 16 and never looked back. Dominic was watching her carefully, and she had the unsettling feeling he could read her thoughts. Tell me about your family, Alicia Martinez. Tell me about your father. Her stomach dropped. My father left when I was a kid. I haven't seen him in over 10 years. His name? Carlos Martinez. The words felt like glass in her throat. Dominic's eyes narrowed. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call, speaking in rapid Italian. Alicia caught only a few words, but one name came through clearly, Carlos. When he hung up, his expression had changed from fury to something more dangerous, calculation. It seems, he said slowly, that your father was more than just absent. He was involved in some very expensive business with some very serious people. Business that, according to our records, was never properly concluded. That's impossible, Alicia whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. How well had she really known her father? He'd always been secretive, always had unexplained money or sudden trips. She'd been too young to ask the right questions. Is it? Dominic moved to the window, staring out at his gardens. Tell me, Alicia, what do you know about inherited debt? The question hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Alicia's mind reeled as she tried to process what Dominic was implying. Inherited debt? The concept felt foreign, impossible, like something from a movie, not her real life. I don't know anything about any debt, she said firmly, though her hands were shaking. My father left us with nothing but unpaid bills and broken promises. If he owed you money, that's between you and him. Dominic turned from the window, and she caught something unexpected in his expression, not just coldness, but genuine confusion. That's what I thought too. Until 20 minutes ago. He pressed a button on the wall, and moments later, Vincent appeared in the doorway, looking distinctly uncomfortable. In his hands was a thick manila folder that he placed on the ornate dresser before quickly retreating. My men aren't just muscle, Alicia. They're thorough. Dominic opened the folder, spreading photographs and documents across the mahogany surface. Carlos Martinez, age 54, last known address. He paused, studying a document. Elm Street. Apartment 3B. Alicia's blood ran cold. That's my apartment. Which used to be his apartment. Dominic continued, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. The apartment he was living in when he borrowed $200,000 from the Torino family in 2018. The Torino family? The name meant nothing to her, but the way Dominic said it suggested she should be afraid. My competitors. Vicious, unpredictable, and very good at holding grudges. He held up a photograph, surveillance footage of her father shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit outside what looked like a nightclub. Your father had gambling debts, Alicia. Big ones? The kind that don't disappear when you skip town. She shook her head violently. You're lying. My father was. He was just irresponsible. He wasn't involved with criminals. Look at the dates. Dominic slid another document toward her. August 2018. Your father borrows money from the Torinos. September 2018, he disappears. October 2018. She paused, watching her face carefully. You move into his apartment. Same name on the lease, same address, same debt. The room felt like it was spinning. Alicia gripped the edge of the bed, trying to steady herself as memories crashed over her. Her father's sudden departure, the way he'd insisted she take over the lease, his last phone call where he'd sounded scared, desperate. "I was 18," she whispered. "I needed somewhere to live. He said the rent was paid up, that I just had to sign some papers. Papers that legally transfer not just the lease, but any outstanding obligations tied to that address." Dominic's voice was gentler now, almost sympathetic. "The Torinos have been looking for Carlos Martinez for 7 years. When they couldn't find him, they started looking for his next of kin. But why now? Why tonight?" Dominic pulled out another photograph, this one more recent. It showed her walking out of Murphy's diner, exhaustion clear on her face. "Because 3 days ago, they found him." The world tilted. "They found my father?" "In a morgue in Miami. Natural causes, heart attack. No family came forward to claim the body." He set down the photograph gently. "The Torinos consider the debt active again. They sent word through the usual channels that they were collecting from his daughter." Alicia's hands flew to her mouth. Her father was dead. The man who'd abandoned her, who'd left her to struggle alone, was gone. And somehow, even in death, he was still ruining her life. "That's why my men were sent to find you," Dominic continued. "The Torinos put out a contract. They wanted you brought in to discuss payment arrangements. But you're not the Torinos." Something dark flickered across Dominic's face. "No. My men intercepted their message. Professional courtesy, you might say. They wanted to handle this themselves, bring you to me first." "Why?" she demanded, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Dominic moved closer, and despite her fear, she found herself transfixed by his storm-gray eyes. "Because the moment I saw you, I knew the Torinos could never have you. Not looking like—" He stopped abruptly, his jaw tightening. "Like your dead wife. Isabella." The name came out like a prayer. "You don't just look like her, Alicia. In this light, from this angle. It's like she's come back to me." A chill ran down Alicia's spine that had nothing to do with the silk nightgown. "I'm not her. I'm not some ghost come back to haunt you." "No," Dominic agreed, but his eyes never left her face. "You're something much more complicated. You're a woman who owes money to people who will kill you for it, who looks exactly like the only person I ever loved, and who fate has placed directly in my hands." He turned away, moving back toward the window. "The question is, Alicia Martinez, what am I supposed to do with you?" The question lingered in the opulent room for what felt like an eternity. Alicia watched Dominic's reflection in the window, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. When he finally turned back to her, his expression had shifted from confusion to something that looked almost like resolve. "You'll stay here," he announced, as if discussing the weather. "Until I figure out how to handle the Torinos situation." "Stay here?" Alicia's voice climbed an octave. "I can't stay here. I have a job, I have responsibilities. Marcus, my son, he needs me. Your son needs you alive," Dominic replied sharply. "Which you won't be if the Torinos get their hands on you. They don't negotiate, Alicia. They don't offer payment plans or second chances. They collect debts in blood when money isn't available." The brutal honesty hit her like a physical blow. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how thin the silk nightgown was, how exposed she felt in this gilded cage. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yesterday I was worried about rent money, and now you're telling me I'm some kind of target for murderers. Yesterday you were living on borrowed time without knowing it." Dominic moved to a cabinet and poured himself a glass of something amber from a crystal decanter. "The Torinos would have found you eventually. My intervention just means you have options now. Options like being your prisoner? Options like being under my protection." He took a sip of his drink, studying her over the rim of the glass. "There's a difference." Despite everything, Alicia felt a flicker of defiance. "And what's the price for this protection? What do you want from me?" Something unreadable crossed Dominic's features. "I haven't decided yet." 3 hours later, Alicia found herself in a different kind of prison, one with marble floors, priceless artwork, and windows that revealed sprawling grounds surrounded by discreet but unmistakable security. She'd been given clothes that fit perfectly, which raised uncomfortable questions about how they'd gotten her measurements, and had been served a meal that was probably worth more than her weekly grocery budget. But none of it felt real. She kept touching her phone, desperate to call Marcus, only to remember that Dominic had taken it. For security reasons. The not knowing was killing her. Mrs. Rodriguez will take good care of him, Vincent had assured her when she demanded answers. We've got people watching the building. The kid's safe. People watching should have been reassuring, but instead it made her skin crawl. These weren't just criminals. They were organized criminals with resources she couldn't begin to comprehend. The mansion felt like a museum after hours, beautiful but empty, full of shadows and secrets. She'd counted 4 guards during her brief tour, all of them polite but unmistakably armed. The message was clear: she was protected, but she wasn't free to leave. She was exploring what appeared to be a library when she heard voices in the hallway. One she recognized as Dominic's, the other was unfamiliar, older, with a heavy Italian accent. You're making a mistake, Dominic, the older voice was saying. This woman, she's not Isabella. Isabella is gone. You think I don't know that, Uncle? Dominic's response was sharp with pain. You think I've lost my mind completely? I think you're seeing ghosts where there are only strangers. And strangers get people killed in this business. Alicia pressed closer to the partially open door, her heart hammering as she eavesdropped on what was clearly a private conversation. The resemblance is remarkable, the older man continued, but she's not our concern. Turn her over to the Torinos, pay her father's debt from petty cash, and be done with it. 200,000 is nothing to us. It's not about the money, Dominic said quietly. Then what is it about? Sentiment? Guilt? The belief that fate has handed you a replacement for the woman you lost? There was a long pause. When Dominic spoke again, his voice was barely audible. When I saw her lying in that bed, for just a moment, I felt alive again, Uncle. For the first time in 3 years. And that terrifies you. More than the Torinos ever could. Alicia backed away from the door, her chest tight with emotions she couldn't name. Fear, yes, but also something else. The raw pain in Dominic's voice, the vulnerability he tried so hard to hide, reminded her that beneath the expensive suits and dangerous reputation, he was a man who'd lost someone he loved. Just like she'd lost her father. Just like she might lose Marcus if she made the wrong choices. When footsteps approached the library, she quickly moved to a bookshelf and pretended to browse the titles. Dominic appeared in the doorway moments later, looking composed again, but she could see the shadows in his eyes. Tomorrow, he said without preamble, I'm bringing your son here. What? The book in her hands nearly slipped to the floor. He'll be safer here than in that apartment building. And you'll be calmer knowing he's close. He paused, something softening in his expression. Children shouldn't suffer for their parents' mistakes. It was such a simple statement, but coming from him, it felt like a promise. And for the first time since waking up in his bed, Alicia felt something besides fear. She felt hope. Marcus arrived the next afternoon like a small hurricane, his 7-year-old energy filling the mansion's solemn halls with laughter and questions. Alicia had never been so grateful to hold her son, breathing in his familiar scent of chocolate milk and playground dirt. Mama, this place is like a castle! Marcus exclaimed, his eyes wide as he took in the crystal chandeliers and marble staircases. Are we rich now? No, baby, Alicia said softly, smoothing his dark hair. We're just visiting. She'd expected Dominic to keep his distance from Marcus, but instead found herself watching in amazement as the dangerous Mafia boss crouched down to the boy's eye level, answering questions about the paintings and suits of armor with surprising patience. You have a pool? Marcus gasped when Dominic mentioned the grounds. I do. Would you like to see it? And just like that, her son was chattering away with the man who held their lives in his hands, completely oblivious to the danger surrounding them. 3 days passed in a strange bubble of domesticity. Marcus splashed in the pool under the watchful eyes of guards disguised as gardeners. Alicia found herself eating meals that didn't come from a microwave, sleeping in sheets that didn't have holes, and slowly, carefully, letting her guard down. It was on the 4th morning that everything changed. Alicia was having breakfast with Marcus when Vincent burst into the dining room, his usually calm demeanor shattered. He whispered something urgent in Dominic's ear, and she watched the color drain from the Mafia boss's face. "Take the boy upstairs," Dominic ordered quietly, but there was steel beneath his words. "What's wrong?" Alicia demanded, but Vincent was already ushering Marcus away with promises of video games. Dominic waited until they were alone before speaking. "We found him." "Found who?" "Your father." He pulled out a manila envelope, his movements careful, deliberate. "My people in Miami have been digging deeper. Carlos Martinez didn't just die of a heart attack, Alicia. He was murdered." The words hit her like ice water. "Murdered?" 3 weeks ago. Made to look natural, but the coroner found traces of a rare toxin in his system. Dominic's jaw tightened. "The kind the Torinos are known for using." Alicia sank into her chair, the world tilting around her. Her father, the man who'd abandoned her, who'd left her to struggle alone, was dead. Murdered. But why? If he owed them money, why kill him? Dead men can't pay debts. Dominic opened the envelope and spread documents across the polished dining table. Because he wasn't running from the debt, Alicia. He was running from them. And 3 weeks ago, he tried to come forward and make a deal. She stared at the documents, police reports, medical examiner notes, and what looked like financial records. What kind of deal? He wanted to pay back the money. All of it, plus interest. Dominic pointed to a bank statement dated just 1 month ago. "Look at this." Alicia's breath caught. The account balance showed nearly $300,000, more money than she'd ever imagined her father having access to. He'd been working, saving, living under an assumed name in Miami for 7 years. Dominic continued. When he heard about his grandson, about you struggling to make ends meet, he decided to come clean. He contacted the Torinos, said he was ready to settle the debt and negotiate protection for his family. Grandson? The word came out as a whisper. He knew about Marcus. He'd been watching from a distance, Alicia. The private investigator reports are all here. Dominic's voice was gentler now. Your father never stopped caring about you. He just thought staying away was the safest thing for everyone. Tears burned her eyes as she picked up one of the investigator reports. There were photos, Marcus on his first day of school, Alicia walking to work, both of them at the playground. Her father had been watching, caring, even as she'd hated him for abandoning them. But the Torinos killed him anyway, she said, her voice thick with grief and rage. They killed him because he was a threat to their reputation. If word got out that they'd let someone walk away from a debt for 7 years, it would make them look weak. Dominic's expression hardened. They took his money and his life, and then they decided to come after his family anyway. As an example, Alicia wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. So the debt is real. And they'll never stop coming for us. The debt was real, Dominic corrected. Past tense. What do you mean? Dominic reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper, official-looking, with multiple signatures and a raised seal. Your father's final act was setting up a dead man's switch. If anything happened to him, his lawyer was instructed to transfer all his assets to a specific account. An account he'd secretly set up in your name. Alicia stared at the document, not understanding. I don't have any accounts like that. You do now. $300,000 plus interest. More than enough to pay the Torinos and walk away clean. He set the paper down in front of her. Your father didn't just abandon you, Alicia. He spent 7 years of his life planning how to save you. The tears came freely now, grief for the father she'd never really known, anger at the years of struggle that could have been avoided, and something that might have been gratitude for a sacrifice she was only now beginning to understand. He protected you the only way he knew how, Dominic said quietly. by disappearing. And when that wasn't enough anymore, he died trying to make it right. Alicia looked up through her tears. Why are you telling me this? You could have just paid the Torinos and let me go. Why does any of this matter to you? Dominic was quiet for a long moment, staring at the documents scattered between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I understand what it means to lose everything trying to protect the people you love. The silence that followed Dominic's words was heavy with unspoken understanding. Alicia studied his face, seeing past the carefully constructed mask of the powerful Mafia boss to the man beneath, a man who carried his own scars, his own losses. Isabella, she said softly, and watched him flinch at the name. She wasn't supposed to be in that car, Dominic said, his voice distant. It was meant for me. A rival family thought they could send a message by targeting my wife. His hands clenched into fists on the table. I spent 3 years hunting down everyone responsible. 3 years of blood and vengeance, and none of it brought her back. Alicia reached across the table without thinking, her fingers covering his. The gesture surprised them both, but she didn't pull away. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry for me, Dominic said, but he didn't move his hand. Be sorry for the men who thought my wife was an acceptable target. They learned otherwise. The threat in his voice should have frightened her, but instead, Alicia felt something she'd never expected to feel toward this dangerous man: understanding. They were both survivors, both people who'd lost family to circumstances beyond their control. What happens now? She asked. With the money, with the debt? Dominic straightened, slipping back into his role as the calculating boss. Now I pay the Torinos what they're owed, plus compensation for their trouble. They'll accept it because refusing would mean war with my family, and they're not strong enough for that fight. And then I'm free to go. You're free to go, he confirmed, but something in his tone suggested it wasn't that simple. But? Alicia prompted. Dominic stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. But walking away means going back to double shifts at the diner, back to struggling to pay rent, back to watching your son grow up in a neighborhood where gunshots are a lullaby. The words stung because they were true. Even with the debt cleared, she'd still be Alicia Martinez, single mother, high school dropout, woman with no prospects beyond service jobs and survival. You're offering me something, she said carefully. What is it? I'm offering you a choice. Dominic turned back to her, and she saw something new in his storm-gray eyes: hope, carefully controlled but unmistakably there. You could take Marcus and disappear. New names, new lives somewhere far from here. I have resources, connections. You'd never have to work another double shift. Or you could stay. The word hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Alicia's heart hammered as she tried to process what he was suggesting. Stay as what? Your prisoner? Your what? Stay as yourself, Dominic said simply. I'm not asking you to be Isabella's replacement. I'm not asking you to be anything other than who you are. He moved closer, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. But these past few days, watching you with Marcus, seeing you find your strength even in the middle of chaos, you've reminded me that there are things worth protecting besides power and territory. Alicia stood slowly, her legs unsteady. And Marcus? Would have every opportunity one can provide. Education, security, a future that doesn't depend on luck or struggle. Dominic's expression softened. And he'd have a mother who doesn't have to choose between paying rent and buying medicine. You barely know us. I know enough. He reached out, his fingers gently touching her cheek. I know you collapsed from exhaustion because you gave everything to your son. I know you stood up to me even when you were terrified. I know you see past the reputation to the man underneath. His touch was surprisingly gentle, and Alicia found herself leaning into it despite every rational thought screaming warnings. This is crazy, she whispered. Completely insane, Dominic agreed. I'm a man who's made his living through violence and fear, asking a woman who works at a diner to trust me with her life and her son's future. Then why does it feel right? The question escaped before she could stop it, and she saw something shift in Dominic's expression: surprise, relief, and something that might have been joy. Because sometimes, he said, stepping closer until she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, fate doesn't care about logic. Sometimes it just gives you exactly what you need when you need it most. Through the dining room windows, Alicia could see Marcus playing in the garden, laughing as he chased something only he could see. For the first time in years, he looked like a child instead of a boy forced to grow up too fast. If I stay, she said carefully. What are we? What is this? We're whatever we choose to become, Dominic replied. Day by day, choice by choice. Alicia thought about her father, about the sacrifices he'd made to protect her. About the bus stop where this had all began, where her collapse had led to this impossible moment. About the life of struggle she'd been living and the life of possibility stretching out before her. Okay, she said, the word barely a breath. Okay? Okay, we'll stay. We'll see what we choose to become. Dominic's smile was like sunrise after the longest night, transforming his entire face. And as he pulled her into his arms, carefully, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Alicia realized that sometimes the most unexpected turns in life were the ones that led you exactly where you belong. Her collapse at the bus stop hadn't been the end of her strength, after all. It had been the beginning of everything.